All right, we made it another day, right? So, as you guys can see a little edit on the bottom, today we're going to be talking about the Articles of Confederation Part 2, which is technically America's first constitution, right? We'll go ahead and explore how it was worked, the challenges it faced, and why it was eventually replaced. So, let's go on. So, like I said, today is Thursday when I'm recording this, so this will be uploaded Friday. But today we basically talked about the Articles of Confederation, the good, the bad, and so we're just like I said, today is going to be more of a deeper dive. So, the Articles of Confederation, right? So, what were they? So, they were ratified in the year 1781, right? It created Toulouse alliance between the 13 states, but it gave most of the power to the states rather than the national government. So, like I said, this was America's first attempt at a constitution, but it had some significant flaws to it, and we'll see what those flaws are in a couple of slides. So let's go ahead and talk about differences between the states, right? So one of the major issues that the states had different ideas, right, about how much power the national government should have, right? So some like Maryland, Delaware, and South Carolina, well, they were more conservative and preferred a strong central government to protect the property rights and to maintain a social order. They didn't want too much democracy, and fearing it will destabilize things, right? As we go on the other hand, we had like Pennsylvania, Georgia, which we'll call the liberal states, right, wanted more democracy. They believed that the people should have more control and wanted to limit the central government's power. So it pretty much just explains what I just told you guys in the slide. That was the differences between the states when it came to the Articles of Confederation. So now we're going to be talking about the Land Ordinance of 1785, right? So one of the successes of the Articles of Confederation was the Land Ordinance of 1785. And we talked about this in class today for the first part of it, but this was a law that established a system to survey and sell land in the Western Territories. They divided land into squares called townships, right? They were 6 miles by 6 miles, right? So one of the important features was that they set land aside, right, especially for the public education, which was a huge deal back then, right? And still be for today, honestly. So this provided the national government with a much needed source of income. So that was the Land Ordinance. That's the information, but they could be a little bit more information about this as well in the first part. Don't get confused. It's all good. So the next one we're going to be talking about is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, right? So the Northwest Ordinance of 1777, well, there was another successful thing that came out of the Articles of Confederation, right? This law created government for the Northwest Territory, and it set up a process for adding new states to the Union, right? So one of the most major things that came out of the Northwest Ordinance was that it banned slavery in the Northwest Territory. It also set population requirements for new state to join the country. So this law laid groundwork for future westward expansion. So go ahead and I know this is all not highlighted. Usually I highlight the slides, but I'll do that later on. So you guys can have the guided notes, but let's go ahead and move on. So we just talked about some of the successes from the Articles of Confederation, but the Articles also had, some major problems. And we'll go ahead and talk about this in the slide. But first of all, the national government had no power to tax, meaning they couldn't raise money to pay off the debts or funds of any national projects, right? The central government was also too weak to keep the states in line, leading to conflicts between them, right? Another one was they also didn't have a national army or navy, so this was hard to protect the borders or to respond to issues, right? They also had no power to regulate trade, which caused a major economic problems, right? To make things worse, any changes to the Articles required an anonymous vote from all 13 states, right, which was nearly impossible to achieve. right? So these were the biggest problems. They even have them listed in the slide. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. So from the previous presentation, there is a video on Shays Rebellion, but there wasn't that much for me to go off of and to elaborate on my own. But this slide in particular is going to be talking about what was Shays Rebellion, right? So let's go ahead. These problems come ahead during the Shays Rebellion era, right? The ones that we just talked about. So this was between the time 1786 and 87, right? After the revolution, many farmers in Massachusetts were struggling with high taxes and the threat of losing their farms to foreclosure, right? So, who led this movement, right? This was led by Daniel Shays. A group of farmers tried to shut down the courts and even planned to seize a federal armory, right? So, this rebellion was a wake-up call because it expressed how powerless the national government was to stop an uprising, right? It highlighted the weakness of the articles as well. So this is very crucial to know. Go ahead and write it down in your guided notes if you haven't already. And this should be very important to study. So go ahead and study, and let's move on. So let's go ahead and talk about why Shays Rebellion is important. It's important because it made people realize that the Articles of Confederation, like I stated in the last slide, wasn't working. The national government didn't have the strength to maintain order, so this rebellion was a major reason why leaders decided to meet in 1787 to create a new and stronger constitution, which we'll get more into, I believe, on Monday. We'll be talking about the Constitution. So we have one more slide, so let's get on to it. So this is basically going to conclude the little short lesson on part 2 of the Articles of Confederation. So when I have part 1 and part 2 days, that means it's heavily going to be tested, right? I just want you guys to retain the information. So taking 2 days to explain you the important content to know is something that I really plan and really want to do in order for you guys to succeed, right? So the Articles of Confederation, they showed the difficulty of balancing power between the states and the national government, right? That's basically what it was. While it had some successes, like we talked about in this presentation, like the Land of Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance in 1787, it ultimately failed because of the weaknesses, right? Shays Rebellion was also a tipping point that led to the Constitutional Convention and the drafting of which we'll talk about on Monday of the U.S. Constitution. So this is basically part 2 of Articles of Confederation. So part 1 and part 2 should be up. Go ahead and study these two. And yeah, thank you for watching.